COVID-related issue, just on another COVID-related issue, do you personally support the decision for Novak Djokovic to play at the Australian Open?
Well, my view is that any individual seeking to enter Australia must comply with our border requirements. Now, Novak Djokovic, when he arrives in Australia, I'm not quite sure when he's going to turn up, but I don't think it's too far away, he has to, because if he's not vaccinated, he must provide acceptable proof that he cannot be vaccinated for medical reasons, and to be able to access the same travel arrangements as fully vaccinated travellers. So we await his presentation and what evidence he provides to support that. If that evidence is insufficient, then he won't be treated any different to anyone else, and he'll be on the next plane home. So there should be no special rules for Novak Djokovic at all, none whatsoever. And so if medical exemptions have been provided by medical professionals, and that's been furnished to him as a proviso for him to get on that plane, well, that will have to stack up when he arrives in Australia. But he'll be treated no different to anyone else, and my view is he should be treated no different to anyone else. There are other cases, there are quite a number over the last couple of years, where people have had these exemptions and have the suitable proof to support their claim in those circumstances. So the circumstance is not unique. The issue is whether he has sufficient evidence to support that he would qualify for that exemption.
Prime Minister, we've seen in Tasmania today 50 staff at the Royal Hobart Hospital have actually caught COVID themselves. You said you discussed pressures on the health system and the workforce that's obviously under a lot of pressure. What's actually being done? And also, if I may, how many rapid tests have you personally paid for?
Well, I have to check with Jen because she's the one that goes and gets them for those situations. I mean, there are tests that the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet have available, and they make them available. They make them available to department staff. I'm an employee in this building like everybody else, and so I access them in the same way that others might in those circumstances. But when they've been used for private use, then Jen's popped around to the chemist or wherever she's gone. I think recently she went to one here in Canberra. For that reason, was able to eventually find one, just like everyone else driving around looking to find one. But where they're provided by the department, well, they're provided by the department, and I'd be no different to any other minister or anyone in those circumstances. Just remind me of the
workforce issues that's actually being done.
Yeah, well, I've already outlined quite a number of measures today, and the most significant issue is how we're managing the isolation testing and ability to work arrangements in these places. And it's the same for aged care as it is for working in hospitals. When people are working in hospitals, and particularly if they're looking after COVID patients themselves, obviously we can have different conditions on them being able to work if they're a close contact than if they're serving coffee or working in this building, for example, or in your job for that matter. And so in those arrangements we have specialised rules, which the Chief Medical Officer was just outlining for aged care workers, which enables them to come back to work sooner. And we have regular testing arrangements that are in place for these workers, which isn't applied in other workplaces, and that's done by the governments. Those tests, it's another example of where tests are being provided free. I note that the tests, when we come to finalising the national framework around education, we'll be providing those free in those circumstances as well. So free tests being provided where they needed to be provided. It was agreed that universally no, but where they're needed, yes, they will be. So they're the arrangements that are particularly needed to manage when people can safely come back to work, so we don't get the furloughing of our workforce, which depletes the important care that is needed in those places, because they are providing important care to people, and if they're not there, then the health outcome more broadly is worse. But Paul, did you want to add anything to that?
I think that in Tasmania, as of the 3rd of January, there were 1,686 people with COVID in the community. Some of those will be health workers, some of those will be aged care workers. Interestingly, there were 0 cases in the hospital, hospitalised in Tasmania on that day. So these are issues that we have to deal with in a living with COVID situation. There will be staff of various industries, but particularly and specifically healthcare and aged care, who will get COVID, and we'll have to work out ways where it's safe to do so that they can come back to work to do the important things that the PM's outlined.
No, sir, over here. No, just
Couple
hang
of
on.
things. With the shift to rapid antigen tests as the default test, are we developing a system to record the results like they have in the UK? And how will that work? And the second thing is Coles has just, in every state and territory except WA, imposing limits on the meat you can buy. 2 packets of chops, 2 packets of mince. Yeah. What's your reaction to that? Are you surprised by that? Concerned?
We've been, I mean, the Treasurer in particular has been working with Coles and Woolies and the other suppliers, and these are one of the issues which we're monitoring very closely. I think that's a precautionary step that they've taken and a wise one. I wouldn't read too much into it. And that's why it's just important that we're working with their distribution centres and treating their workers the same we would healthcare workers and those in aged care, and that's exactly what we're seeking to have in place. I mean, the Treasurer last night was speaking to the Chief Executive of Coles and spoken directly to the head of Woolworths as well, and Metcash. We've been working with them as well to work through those issues, as you would expect us to do, as we have done now on multiple occasions through many waves of this virus. Whether it was the big lockdown the first time round in Victoria or the second one in New South Wales and Victoria, we were presented with the same challenges then, and we got through them. That's what the National Coordinating Mechanism does. It works with the supply chains and the large corporates. This is why the transport industry is very important as well. I mean, the reason we're not mailing rapid antigen tests out to everybody, and this was suggested at today's meeting, that was one suggestion made, and the reason we didn't do that was because we know there is already enough stress on the transport distribution network, and General Fruin knows that better than anyone, as we want them to focus on delivering vaccines to vaccination hubs. And so we don't want to put additional stress on that for what are non-essential tests, and that's why we didn't go down that path. I mean, the United Kingdom is finding that is a very difficult system to run, and their supplies are exhausted within an hour of being posted. So there's no magic solution there. There are no magic solutions, full stop. And so this virus will continue to challenge us, and it's important that we all remain calm. We understand people are frustrated by it. We're all frustrated by it. I'm frustrated by it. But whether I'm frustrated or not is not the point. The point is that we have to just keep working through the problems. There's plenty of armchair critics. There's plenty of those who say this should have been done or that should have been done. You hear from those people all the time. But what's important is you just keep working the problem and dealing with the challenges that are presented, and as far as possible, being able to get other measures in place in ahead of time.
On the what? The reporting on the rats results, how that works?
In place, and at the moment, in the first instance, that is done through the GPs, and that's already happening now.
Do a rapid antigen test and you test positive, you have to contact your GP. Is that how it works? Or
I would strongly, people who have COVID should contact their GP. They should let them know, because that is the principal point of care under the primary health network. And they're in a position to provide further advice, and telehealth is put in place to support that. And the Acting Secretary of the Department of Health today went through in some detail about how that is being used to support people who are managing their COVID at home. And so that is always your first point of contact when it comes to managing your illness if you're not in hospital.